Good evening and welcome to Domination and Submission Radio. My name is Mike Makai, and I'm your host with the most DS, BDSM, kink, and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio. I'm also the author of Domination Submission, the BDSM Relationship Handbook, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and about 50 other fine booksellers. Our show tonight is about first meetings. We're talking about first meetings between people in the lifestyle. If you have an opinion about this topic, or you'd like to call in, ask a question, or tell us your story of your first meeting, then call in. The number is 347-857-1862. Again, 347-857-1862. We also have a chat room at the bottom of the page. If you're listening to us live at Blog Talk Radio, get a free account there. You can scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll be able to chat in the chat room. So if you're a little too shy about calling in and asking a question, you could ask us in the chat room and we'll try to get that answer to your question on the air. Please do check out our website at domination-submission.com. That's domination-submission.com. And that way you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook and all those other social media venues. My co-host this evening is my favorite switchy Amazon redhead, Little Red. How you doing, Red?
I'm doing good. I forgoed the espresso tonight.
Oh, so we don't have to pad the walls, so you won't be bouncing off them tonight, I guess, huh?
Probably not.
All right. Well, we are going to be talking about first meetings, and Red, how many first meetings of where you have gotten to know somebody maybe online and then made a specific point of going off and meeting that person? How many times have you done something like that, or have you ever?
I've done it a few times. Obviously, in the kink community, it's not like we have plenty of fish, even though that's kind of kinky into itself. But getting on and trying to meet people, I'd probably say about a dozen times total. I like to meet people in person and get to know them that way versus online.
Sure. And that's actually probably a lot more than the average person who's listening to this show tonight. I would venture to guess that the average person listening tonight may not have ever done this, and so they are listening with probably taking notes right now because it's a scary thing to contemplate. I've done it a lot, but that is a function of the fact that I've been in the lifestyle for 37 years. I've been online since the internet was invented, and I'm a horrible flirt, and so I just talk to anybody, and you know how that works. So I've met literally hundreds of people in the course of 30-something years, and it's sometimes worked out really nice, and sometimes it's worked out really badly. It's just like anything else. You got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince or princess, I guess. And so we'll be talking about some of the things that you might be able to do to not only keep yourself safe, but to give yourself a higher probability of ending up with a prince or princess instead of a frog. And we'll also be talking about all the different types of first meetings and what some of the practical considerations you may want to take into account before embarking on your very first attempt at this. And even if you've done this a lot of times, you're probably going to be able to learn something that just could save your life someday. So I think this is a show that has a lot to offer people, particularly people who might be concerned about their safety and that sort of thing.
There's horror stories. Everybody's got them, and everybody's got really good ones. So it'll be interesting for some of our listeners to get some tips and tricks.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, now we are, again, I just want to emphasize that if you are listening right now and you have a story you want to share with us, by all means, give us a call. The number is 347-857-1862. I'm always fascinated to hear people's first meeting stories. And in fact, I've told a few of them in my book, and I might even be talked into telling one or two of them tonight during the show. Depends on how we have to do too much tap dancing tonight. By the way, I had a very weird thing. I have a little pre-show ritual that I do, every week, just to kind of shake off the nervousness that just naturally occurs before you do a show. So I usually take a nice hot shower or something and just kind of meditate in the shower or something. In the middle of my hot shower, the phone starts to ring. And it rings, and it rings, and it rings. And I finally said, oh, please, they're just going to have to give up sooner or later. But they don't. and it keeps ringing, and it keeps ringing. And finally I said, fine. I get out of the shower, soaking wet, all soaped up still, throw a towel around me, I run to the phone and pick it up. And it's my artificial intelligence phone subby reminding me that it's time to take my hot shower.
I was going to say, it wasn't me. I was not the one calling, going, hey, don't forget.
Yeah.
It wasn't me this time.
Yeah, so that's my ironic story for the day. Anyway, let's just dive right into this topic. There are a couple of points I really want to make before we get too deeply into the weeds on this. And I think the first one that I want to make, right off the top of my head here, is that you cannot prevent somebody from harming you if their intent is to do so.
Oh,
okay?
Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you're standing in the middle of your local mall with 1,000 people all around you. If somebody wants to harm you, they're going to. Okay. About all you can do, really, is tip the scales in your favor in terms of making it more trouble than it's worth for that person if somebody really wants to harm you. So in other words, yeah, he could pull out a knife and stab you in the middle of the mall, but 50 people are going to jump on him and pound him to a pulp, and he might just decide, okay, it's not worth the hassle. And so this is kind of the way you need to approach this whole thing, because a lot of people somehow have gotten it into their heads that they can keep themselves perfectly safe by doing certain things. And yeah, you can keep yourself safer, but there's no such thing as keeping yourself entirely safe. And if somebody is determined to hurt you or harm you or whatever, they're going to do it. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing at the time. So that's point number one that I really wanted to throw out there before we talk about anything else.
There is a way to keep yourself absolutely 100% safe. It's called a panic room, and don't ever leave it.
Right. Never leave your house. Now,
you know, the smart ass in me had to come out at some point. Let's just get it started.
Red, it's not getting it out that's the problem. It's getting it put away every once in a while. That's All right, now here's the second point that I've got, and this is almost always particular to women. Women are typically more vulnerable in these kinds of situations, and they tend to be the victims more often than not in these kinds of situations. But here's something that they almost never think about, and that is they are as much of a threat to the other person as that other person is to them. They don't think about it, but they are. Right? And I've seen this many, many, many times. I meet a lot of people, particularly since the book has come out. I travel all over the country, and I stop and have coffee with people all the time. And it isn't always a date or something. And sometimes it's just an aspiring author who wants some tips on how to get published. Sometimes it's just somebody who likes the book and wants to say hi and get it signed. Sometimes it's just somebody in the neighborhood. Well, anyway, it happens a lot. And it never fails that their entire focus sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes, their entire focus is, well, they just want to make sure that they're safe and it's in a safe place, blah, blah, blah. And that's great. But they never seem to understand that they are as much a threat to me as I am to them. And let me just say that, in 37 years, I've had my life threatened. I've had the lives of friends and family threatened. I've had my car sabotaged. I have had smear campaigns formed against me for one reason or another. I mean, I have been the target of some really underhanded, not nice people. And I'm not talking about just the women that I've met. I'm all of you out there. You're so concerned sometimes about your own safety that you don't realize that guy is probably quaking in his boots too. He has no idea what to expect. And there are people out there, there have been women out there who have preyed on gullible, naive guys. And there are some very scary stories of female serial killers out there who pick up guys and do all kinds of bad things to them. So it's not just you girls. It's all of us that have to worry about those sorts of things.
It's not as predominant for females to be more aggressive, but yes, it is a factor in it that, yes, we can do you boys harm.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not talking about the average person out there. I'm talking about, the female Ted Bundys out there, and there are some. Believe me, there are some. So you've got to be really careful. Guys, you need to be careful too. Don't let some woman, if you're a guy listening to this show tonight, don't let some woman convince you that it's all about her safety, because guess what? It's about your safety too. That's all I'm going to say about that. The third general caveat that I'm going to throw out tonight before we get into the weeds, which we're getting kind of into the weeds already, but sometimes we worry so much about safety that we forget the whole idea is to have some fun, I mean, that's the whole idea. Why else meet somebody? Is to enjoy a cup of coffee with somebody, get to know somebody, have a little fun. It might even be a play party date or something. But the whole idea is supposedly to have fun. But if you get so wrapped up in ensuring that everything is perfectly safe and acceptable and problem-free, sometimes you can just suck all the life out of it, all the fun out of it too. So give that some thought as well.
Pancakes. Pancakes are always a fun first date.
IHOP.
I had to be random.
Red and I get together for brunch at IHOP every once in a while. She's fairly local to me, and our favorite activity is to make waitresses blush. It's a lot of fun.
Oh.
All right, so we are going to talk about some different types of first meetings, and we're going to kind of stick to the way I wrote about them in the book. So if you haven't read the book, you're getting a little bit of a preview here. If you have read the book, you're getting a little bit of a recap here. But essentially, I lay out in the book about 5 or 6 different types of first meetings, and they're very different. And if you prepare for one type, but you end up in another type, guess what? You're not prepared. So we're just going to go through them a little bit and talk about them and see if any of these resonate with our listeners. And the first one is one that we've all experienced, even those of you who have never, ever met up with somebody that you met online and then met up with them in real life. You've experienced this one, because this one is what I call the imaginary first date. It's your fantasy first date. It's the first date that never happens, the first meeting that is perfect in your head, but not so much in real life. And let's face it, we've all had them, and we're all going to continue to have them. And the trick is to not get so wrapped up in your imaginary first meeting that you never make it to your real one. Ever had that happen to you, Red?
Yeah, but it was kind of a blow-off on both sides. It just never quite, timelines never quite matched up. And, you keep saying, okay, we're meeting Friday. And then, something happens and you guys don't meet. And then I kind of got disappointed, let down, and I was just like, forget about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The imaginary first date is perfect. Imaginary first meeting, I guess I should call this. It's perfect. You never have lettuce in your teeth. You're never on your period. You don't have a screaming 2-year-old in the back seat. Nobody passes gas. It's the perfect fairy tale first meeting.
You look fabulous in your gown. Your makeup's done perfectly. You look like a movie star on the red carpet. Your hair is great, and nothing. Yeah.
So the trick is not to get so focused on that you never actually make it to a real first meeting. And I have a little bit of a story about that. And in fact, I'm going to throw it in here really quick. I'm going to try and see if this story can be told quickly. I'm not sure it can, but it's in the book, and I've told it to many of my friends. When I was in the Army a long time ago, galaxy far, far away, I was staying in Germany, and I fell in love online with a girl in Washington State. And just to tell you how obsessed I was with this woman, I had $1,100 phone bills for a couple of months in a row. And in fact, that is what convinced me that it was time to go see her, because I couldn't afford $1,100 phone bills every month. So I took some time off. I got on a plane, and I flew from Europe to Washington State to see her. Checked into my hotel, gave her a call, said I'm here, and she knew I was coming. In fact, she was very excited about it the whole time. And so I finally got there, and believe me, it's a 26-hour flight or something. And I get there, get checked into the hotel, I give her a call, I said, I'm here. She says, I'm so excited, I can't wait to see you, I'll be there at dinner. And I said, okay, dinner, 7 o'clock, in the steakhouse downstairs at the hotel. She says, fine. 7 o'clock rolls around, I show up at the steakhouse downstairs, I tell the waiter D that I'm waiting on somebody, he seats me anyway, he's going to keep an eye out for her. And I sit, and I sit, and I sit. And about an hour later, I finally decide, okay, maybe something's gone wrong. I'll just go ahead and order, and at least I'll enjoy some dinner. So I had a great steak, a couple of stiff drinks, went back to the room. And you got to remember, this is a long time ago. I'm really ancient. I'm old as dirt. So this is before we all...
Oh, my God, you so are not.
This is before texting and stuff, okay? I know it's hard for you to believe, but there was a time. Anyway, so I get back to the room. I give her a call from the room. I said, what happened? And she says, got all prettied up, I got in my car, I drove down there, and I drove around the block 7 times and chickened out and went home. And she says, but I did slow down a few times to see if I could see you through the windows of the restaurant. And I said, okay, well, isn't that special? I tried very hard not to get angry, and I tried to set it up so that maybe we could try again the next day. So the next day, I arranged for us to meet at a little Irish pub about 3 or 4 blocks away from the hotel. This is the way I think. I thought, well, okay, maybe it was because we were meeting at my hotel. That's a scary thing, going to the hotel that somebody is staying at. So how about we make it a little bit less scary? I'll meet you 5 blocks down the road at this Irish pub. And she says, fine, I'll be there at 7 o'clock. Well, 7 o'clock rolls around. she's not there. 8 o'clock rolls around, she's still not there. At least there's some really good live Irish music and great Irish beer. And so I proceeded to get totally sloshed. And at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I decide, okay, time to go back to the room. And I do. And I call her. And she's sobbing on the phone. She feels really, 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 really bad because she just chickened out again. And at this point, I'm not only a little bit peeved, but I'm pretty sloshed as well. And so I told her, well, this is kind of dumb. I've come 7,000 miles just to get stood up twice. This is not going to work out. I decided I was going to go ahead and leave. So I made plans to fly out the next day. And I just expressed my regrets that it didn't work out. I was flying out of a military Space A terminal out of McChord Air Force Base up in Washington. And this was also kind of before the time where they had huge barricades around every airport entrance and everybody had to be x-rayed to get anywhere near the terminal. I mean, this was back when people could actually just wander through the terminals and meet people as they got off the plane, that sort of thing, right? So I'm waiting for my plane, and who walks up? Her. And she's gorgeous. She's absolutely gorgeous. And, she says, I'm so sorry. I thought you would be disappointed in me. I was so worried that you wouldn't like me and that you would be disappointed. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. And I just looked at her and I said, holy cow, you're beautiful. And we kind of hugged and we kissed. And they called my flight. And I turned around and I got on the flight and I left. And that was the last time we ever spoke. And it was a kind of a heartbreaking thing. It kind of makes me sad even to tell the story now because, there's so many things that could have gone right there but didn't, But then again, at least one of us didn't turn out to be an axe murderer or something like that. So I guess there's a bright side to this story. But, it can definitely go badly if it isn't well thought out, if it isn't planned well and executed well. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, and hopefully you'll avoid having a story like that to tell.
About right around 18. Long distance pen pals, talked on the internet all the time in chat rooms, got to know each other. It was a soldier station in Georgia, and I was living in North Carolina at the time, and we made all these grand plans to meet up. He took leave, supposedly. I was all dolled up. I had my makeup done. I had my hair done. I had this perfect dinner. I was cooking. He was going to come up, spend the whole weekend up there, and this was a Friday night, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited all day. Got everything all done and waited. Didn't hear from him till Sunday. Not one peep, nothing, no phone calls, no responding to emails, nothing. And at this time, I'm livid. I went way out of my way, set up a whole awesome weekend, little sightseeing stuff, whole 9 yards. And he gives me the story that he's 2 hours away from me and he gets recalled. And I'm like, okay. So we set it up again for the following month. He took leave again, and I'm doing my air quotes, started to do it again, and once again, he got recalled. I'm like, all right, dude, once I can understand. Twice, not like this when you put in for leave and you're supposed to be signed out on leave, because this was before all the mass deployments were going on some of the smaller bases. And after that, chatted, I think, 3 or 4 more times on the phone, and I was like, if you're not going to make the effort to come see me when I get done with basic, don't bother. And I never heard from him again.
Yeah, a lot of these things turn out to be, and this is, again, going back to the imaginary first meeting. You can become so focused on that imaginary first meeting that when the opportunity for a real one comes up, you are paralyzed with fear. You are so afraid that it will not live up to the unrealistic standards that you have set in your own imagination that you never end up doing it. And just don't do that. We are all flawed, and you're not the only one. Even I have flaws. Hard to believe, isn't it? Anyway, we're going to
talk. Shot face. Can you tell?
Yeah, right. We're going to talk, before the break, we are going to talk about one more type of first meeting, which you don't have to worry too much about, and that's called the serendipitous first meeting. And serendipity, obviously, is when something just luckily happens without any forethought or without any planning involved. It just happens. It falls into your lap. It's a lucky break, so to speak. And it happens a lot more than you probably realize. But you've met a lot of people out there, many of you, who would make great potential partners, and you've already met them. take advantage of that. I mean, that is a huge advantage, believe it or not. I mean, it's a very, very scary thing to go out there and meet somebody for the first time. If you've already met some of these people, give them a shot. I mean, that takes about 50% of the pressure off of you right then and there. And sometimes it's pure, unadulterated luck. Other times it could be a little bit more planned, I guess, if serendipity can be. But for example, the fetish community is pretty small. I mean, you could probably count all of the people in your little hometown on two hands that are actively involved in the local kink community. And they have friends, and you have friends. And so sooner or later, you end up not only meeting all the local folks, but you end up meeting some of their friends too. The events, even if the events are halfway across the country, you will run into the same people over and over and over again. So take advantage of that. Serendipitous meeting is a good thing, and you can definitely use the synergy and the serendipity of meeting people from other parts of the country at fetish events or lifestyle events or play parties or dungeons or whatever. Use it to your advantage. It's a great opportunity to just kind of step right over the challenge of setting up a first meeting with somebody.
That's actually how me and my partner met. It was completely by chance, and it was one of those things where we worked in the same place and came across each other, and then one thing led to another, and we started talking, and now we're together. So I actually got really lucky. Yeah,
you did. But again, take advantage. Luck, you know what they say, luck often arrives at the front door looking like work and people don't answer. You got to take advantage of it when it shows up. All right, so we are going to take a very quick musical interlude here. It's only going to last about a minute and a half, and then we'll be back with more Domination and Submission Radio. My name is Mike Makai. My co-host is Little Red, and we're talking about first meetings. We're going to give you a lot of practical tips on how to make sure that yours go well from here on out. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. And we are back. You're listening to DS Radio. I'm Mike Makai. My co-host is Little Red. We're talking about first meetings. And we're going to talk about some practical considerations, some of the things that you might be able to do to ensure that you're not only safe at your first meeting, but you have a little bit of fun too. Another little story, and this is a real short one, by the way. I talk to a lot of people. I mentor a lot of people. I'm considered kind of an advisor to a lot of people who are just getting into the lifestyle. And very often people will come to me for advice, and sometimes that advice is about meeting their new dominant or their new submissive for the very first time. And it's always kind of interesting the way they approach it, at least to me. For example, I had one young lady who was about 20 years old, still living at home with her parents at 20, college student, who was making plans to meet her brand new dominant for the very first time. She was living in Kansas. He's living in Colorado, I believe. And the plan was for him to drive out from Colorado and stay with her for a couple of days, but because she lived with her folks, they decided they should stay someplace else. So I said, so where are you going to be staying? And she says, well, we're going to stay at my best friend's house. And I said, are you sure that that's a good idea? And she says, oh, yeah. I mean, we've been friends since kindergarten. We've been best friends since kindergarten. It'll be fine. And I said, well, what kind of an environment is it going to be? And she says, well, it's going to be my friend and her husband and their 3 kids, their 2 dogs, their cat, and their parrot. And that train wreck, I don't know how she didn't see it a mile away, but I couldn't not see it. You're not going to have a very good meeting, a first meeting, in a house with your best friend, her husband, their 3 kids, 2 dogs, a cat, and a parrot. I'm sorry. There's just no way that is going to end well. Because even if you two had the most beautiful chemistry on the planet, there's just no way that it's going to work under those circumstances. So I don't know if they ever did meet, but I advise that they get a cheap hotel or something. Anyway, so we're going to talk now about 3 more types of first meetings, and they are the acquainting meeting, the hookup meeting, and the transitional meeting. And I do write about these at great length in the book. We're not going to go into that much detail here because it's radio. But we are going to mention them at least and kind of toss them out because I think it's important that people listening tonight get it into their heads that not all first meetings are the same. One first meeting might just be for coffee. Another one might be for 8 days of kinky sex. And there's a whole lot of gray area in between. And so you need to understand going into it what it is that you're planning on doing and then stick to the plan. If you're considering changing your plan anywhere in the middle of the plan, this is probably not a good thing. That's usually where you get into trouble. So let's talk first about the acquainting first meeting. And that's usually where you're just meeting to have coffee or have dinner or have lunch and get acquainted. You do this a lot, don't you, Red?
Yeah, pretty frequently. It's a lot of fun. It's not as nerve-wracking as some people might think, but at least for me, because I really don't care if people like me or not.
Well, they do. They do. I got to tell our listeners that I first met Red at a BDSM group munch with about 20 other people there. And I can honestly say that I don't remember any of the other 19 people at all because Red was being Red. Only way I could explain it. Red is one of those people who, when she goes into Starbucks, every employee in the place knows her name. Yeah. No,
I'm only in there like 4 times a week, sometimes multiple times a day. No, they don't know me well at all.
So, Red is one of those characters that everyone knows within 5 minutes. Now, an acquainting meeting is usually going to be a lunch or a coffee or dinner or something. And again, the entire purpose is just to get acquainted. Where you get into trouble is where you start out with what should be an acquainting meeting, and in the middle of it you decide that you want to spend the weekend together or something. That's when it gets very dangerous, because guess what? You told all your friends you were going out for coffee, and now you're gone for 3 days. This is not a good thing. So do keep that in mind, that the precautions that you need to take for an acquainting meeting are entirely different than the precautions that you need to take for a hookup meeting or a transitional meeting or something like that. So make sure you know what your plan is before you go into it. And we're gonna talk about safety considerations and stuff like that in a little bit, because for the most part they tend to be the same for all types of meetings. But the acquainting meeting is a good way to get started doing this. I highly recommend that you focus primarily on this type of first meeting. There's always time to do the other stuff. Most of the time when people get into trouble in this lifestyle, it's because they're in such a damn hurry. And have a little patience, and there's always tomorrow or next weekend. So don't be in such a hurry to go too far too fast, is my advice to you. On that note, the very next type of meeting we're going to talk about is the hookup meeting, and this is where a lot of people go too far too fast. And a hookup meeting is essentially a meeting where you meet for the first time with the express intent of having an intimate or sexual encounter of some sort. Now, there are a lot of drawbacks and a lot of dangers involved in that.
Absolutely. Again, I look at it more from the medical standpoint. Obviously, you're asking for a whole host of problems when you decide to become intimate with someone you really don't have 2 seconds of knowledge of. And then on top of that, that person could be the axe-wielding serial killer who's going to stuff your body in a barrel and put you in a storage locker. Things like that just are, no.
Yeah. Our intent is not to scare people today, but my philosophy is go into these things with your eyes open. Now, some people have a much higher tolerance level for potentially scary situations, and some people have a very low tolerance level for it, and only you know that about yourself. I don't scare easily, but I'm also a very cautious person because, again, I've had situations where I've had, crazy stalker people trying to make my life miserable, and so I naturally am very cautious, but it doesn't mean that I keep everybody at arm's length either. It just means that I have to be a little bit more careful than some folks, and I have to be a little bit more smart about how these things play out. So now, a hookup meeting, again, is going to starts out with the assumption that there's going to be some intimacy there, that you're going to spend a weekend together or a week together or something like that. Just off the top of your head, aside from the natural risks of sexual encounters with strangers, Red, but what would you think some of the other risks of a meeting like this would be?
Obviously being chopped up and put in a barrel and in a storage locker and nobody ever knowing what happened to you.
Right.
It can absolutely be psychologically detrimental because it could end up being beyond your control. Your wants and needs might not match up with them, and, if you're not a masochist and this person is a true sadist, they're really not going to care whether you enjoy pain or not. They're going to get off on it. So, being cautious about who you're meeting for those kind of things is a number one priority in my book because you're asking for trouble if you don't have a really good base for it.
Right. I think that one of the most common risks of something like this is the simple matter of bad chemistry. It's one thing if you want to go have coffee with somebody and there just is no chemistry there. It turns out that just the person just is a turnoff to you, or you're just not attracted, or that you just you don't like the way they chew their food, or you don't like how they smell, whatever it is. There's something there that just rubs you the wrong way. Well, if you're just having coffee with that person, you can deal with anything for about an hour and then go home and make it a point not to have coffee with that person again. But now imagine that all of those things or any one of those things happen, but now you're stuck in a hotel room with that person for 4 days. I can't imagine a worse form of hell than that. Can you? It just boggles my mind how somebody could actually end up stuck in that kind of a situation. And people do. It happens a lot. And it makes it very, very difficult to extract yourself from those kinds of situations. So
this is where your best friend comes into play with the emergency text message, something is wrong at home and you need to leave immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, it's so it isn't always just worried about so and so being an axe murderer. Sometimes it's just a matter of so and so can't stop picking at his teeth, or so and so has a really bad toupee or something. I don't know, but I mean there must be a million and one things. So and so hasn't had a shower in a year. I have a story about that too. You just love my stories, don't
God.
you? I arranged a get-together, a reunion of sorts. I used to be a moderator for a chat room, a BDSM chat room. This was many, many years ago, that had people from all over the country in the chat room all the time. We probably had 100 people in that chat room all the time. And at one point I said, hey, we ought to throw a party. And everyone went, yay, let's do it. And so because I was in Texas, and Texas is kind of in the middle of the country, I said, no, okay, let's do it in Dallas. And so people immediately started making plans to come to Dallas for this big party we were going to throw. And then people were flying in from the East Coast, from the West Coast, North, South. I think I've even told this story once. But one of the guys who made plans...
Yeah, that's why I said, oh, God, I figured it was going to be this one.
You've heard this one. One of the guys who made plans to come to this reunion was a real ladies' man. I mean, he was just suave and debonair, right? He was suave. He was cool. He was everybody's perfect dom. And half the women who flew in that day did so for the express purpose of meeting this guy. And when he got off the plane, he just blew me away, because here was a guy who weighed, I kid you not, about 500 pounds maybe. I picked him up at the airport. He couldn't get into my car. He couldn't sit in the passenger seat of my car. He was so big. I had to fully recline the front seat of the passenger side of the car so that he could crawl in like a terrier crawling into a hole after a rat. So he crawls in, and he rode from the airport to the hotel where we were having the event. He rode on his stomach because He was too big to actually sit in my car. And when he introduced himself to the other folks at this gathering, you could have heard a pin drop, particularly in the case of the one woman who offered her apartment to him earlier as a place to stay. And she couldn't very well take that back now, could she? So she had done it with no idea of who he really was. And so luckily she had a big pickup truck. She took him to her place in her truck, and he fit better in her truck than he did in my sports car. But anyway, she also learned that he hasn't bathed in over a year, not one, because he's too big to fit into a bathtub or a shower. It would be dangerous for him. So my poor friend ended up stuck with a house guest for 3 days who not only broke her furniture every time he sat on it, he broke a couple of her chairs, but stunk up her place so bad that she literally had to have a professional crew come in and clean it after he left. So just a brief little taste of how bad it can go when you really don't know, who it is that you are offering your place to or offering to spend a week with or something like that. So seriously, highly recommend a cup of coffee before you start offering anything. That's just the world according to Mike Makai. So, hookup meetings. They can be a lot of fun, but they can also be a train wreck. Try to go with the former, not the latter. The last one we want to talk about, Red, is going to be transitional first meeting. The transitional first meeting is that meeting where you are making the transition from one stage of a relationship to another. Let's say that you have been in a long-distance relationship for a long time, and you are ready to take it to the next step. And the plan is for that relationship to go further than it has up to this point. So you're going from a long-distance relationship to a 24/7 live-in relationship, or you're going from a casual relationship to a committed relationship, something like that. But it's transitional, and it marks a milestone in your relationship. Now, if those kinds of meetings are hard enough, even if they're not your first meeting, wouldn't you say? I mean, if you've been dating a guy in real life for a year, and now you're going to go out on a date, and you both, the plan is to go out on this date and become engaged or something, that's kind of stressful, even if you know the guy and have met him many, many, many times.
Yes and no. It's kind of nerve-wracking when you're going from that, because my situation was very similar to that. We went from being very casual to him finding out about the lifestyle and becoming a part of it. And my rules are very simple, but my rules are very solid.
Right.
So it was kind of nerve-wracking to make that transition into more of a complete committed couple. I mean, we were monogamous as dating, but now it was far more serious for me bringing him in to the DS lifestyle as my dom and making it more...
Right. For you, this was transitional in more ways than one, because you went from a casual relationship to a committed relationship, but you also introduced him from a vanilla world into your BDSM world, all at the same time.
Yeah, so this was very complicated.
And so imagine if that were happening, and you were also, on top of all of that, meeting him for the very first time.
See, that for me, I don't think I could do it. I mean, obviously, if I had to, I could, but I have to know that person. There has to be something there that I see in their face, in their eyes, sure. Not just hearing their tone or through a text or whatever. Right,
but now I'm not saying that this is somebody that you just met online as well. For example, I write in my book about a transitional first meeting with my former submissive Jade, where we had literally spent 6 months in a long-distance relationship before we had our transition. Our first meeting was a transitional first meeting, and it went very well, exceptionally well, in fact. And I'm not going to tell the story, but if you're interested, it's in the book. But it doesn't always work out that way, and so there are a lot of considerations that you need to take into account, and the foremost being that it's a very stressful thing, it's a very complex thing, and you do need to think it all the way through, including a lot of the unintentional consequences. So let's spend the last bit of the show, Red, talking about safety considerations. What are some of the things that you can do to keep yourself safe? And again, I'm going to remind our folks that there's nothing you can do to be entirely safe, but you can make it such a pain in the ass for any predator or a jerk that he just doesn't bother with it. He'll go find an easier target. So and you mentioned a few already, but what are some of the things that right off the top of your head that you would suggest that would help make a first meeting safer, Red?
Always meet in a public, neutral place, a pub, a bar and grill, a coffee shop, an IHOP, somewhere public. Always let someone know where you're going. If it's just for coffee or, dinner, let someone know where you're going and have a specific kind of timeline. Say, if you haven't heard from me by, say, this time, saying, hey, I'm home, or, hey, we're going to a movie afterwards, start the process of texting me or calling me and finding out what's going on. It might be going great and you forgot to text, but always have that backup plan. If you're going to do a hookup meeting for a weekend and you're going to jet down to Dallas, you're going to jet off to another city, leave a note somewhere that someone will find it on your kitchen counter, somewhere, just in the event that no one hears from you and you're not at work Monday. They have a good starting point if you didn't actually remember to tell your best friend you're going out of town for the weekend.
Right. That's not going to keep you safe necessarily, but at least it will leave a paper trail so that somebody can figure out what happened to you if you drop off the face of the earth. And sometimes that can save your life. Because sometimes you drop off the face of the earth and you're also still alive and somebody can go find you. And so it's important that you do leave some sort of a paper trail. And even if it's not a note on the kitchen table that says, hey, I went to Cancun with Bob, who I have never met before, even if it's not something like that, the least you can do is use your credit card or debit card to buy gas on the way. Use your debit card or credit card to pay for a hotel room or pay for a meal. Those things will show up later if they ever have to try and track you down. That's a great way to do it.
We had a very good, that was one of the other ones I was going to pull up because I've done it. In our chat room, said bring a friend. They don't necessarily have to sit with you. They could be somewhere else in the bar, or they can be somewhere, close by. But bring a friend so they can keep an eye out for you. That is, buddy system is always awesome.
I'm going to tell you, I don't always recommend that. In fact, I never actually recommend it. I'm not going to recommend against it because some people, they just really are so frightened prospect of a first meeting that they literally have to have a friend with them. And I understand that. I don't begrudge them that privilege. However, I am going to say that having a friend with you is the surest way that I can even think of to kill any chemistry that there might have been in that first meeting. And it's kind of like any date. If you're vanilla and you're just gaga over some guy and he finally asks you out and then you say, great, and do you mind if I bring my next door neighbor? And that just pretty much sucks the wind out of his sails. At that point, he realizes, okay, I've got to, keep the neighbor happy too. I've got to talk about things other than you and me.
Well, when I've taken my friends with me, I've gone early. They've sat somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So that way, in case things started going south, we had pre-signal set up, so that way if I did a certain thing, they need to start texting me to get me out of there. Well,
I think the false sense of security, and again, I think it is a false sense of security. I don't believe having a friend there makes you any safer, to be perfectly honest with you. And in fact, that is something that I have said to somebody just recently. I said, what makes you think that having a friend there is going to ensure that I am who I say I am, or that I am safe, or that I am not an axe murderer? I mean, okay, so your friend comes, and if I'm an axe murderer, now you're both in trouble. You see what I'm saying? I'm not sure that it does a whole lot other than make you feel better and just kind of comfort you a little bit. And that's fine. If that's what you need, that's fine too. But I would say that there are a lot of different ways that you can not ensure your safety.
Typically, most assailants aren't going to take on two people at the same time if they're only expecting one. They're prepped for one. They're not usually prepped for two, and they don't know how to handle it. So it kind of throws them off balance.
First of all, I would never surprise anybody with that. Okay, so I mean, if I was look, you know me, Red. I'm a nice guy. I like to think I am anyway. If I made a date with you to go have dinner and you surprised me with a friend because you were worried that I might be an axe murderer or something, I would say, you two have a great dinner. Have a nice life.
No, I wasn't saying have them right there. Just somewhere in the vicinity.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you don't surprise people with this sort of thing. This is something that should be negotiated, and that's fine. That's fine. But again, this kind of goes back to point number 3 at the beginning of the show, which was the whole idea is to have fun. And it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a date. And I don't know any other way to just suck all the fun out of a date than to drag along a chaperone. That's just me.
Oh, now, I know a better one.
Oh, do tell.
Toddlers.
Toddlers. There you go. Bring your 2-year-old. That will do it. Best form of birth control on the planet, I think. Anyway, I wouldn't surprise somebody with that. But, there are lots of things you can do. Again, meet in a public place, leave a paper trail, tell somebody where you're going, even if you're not going to tell them the whole story. You may not say, hey, I'm going to go spend the weekend with this guy I never met before. No, you don't want to have to do that. But you do say, hey, I'm going to meet a guy that I've never met before, and if you give me a call. And if I'm not having a good time, that'll give me a good excuse to leave. Go home, all right? So have a safe call. Have somebody call you. Or just keep it in mind that you should be calling somebody else and letting them know you're okay. And, again, there's a lot of high-tech stuff, too. I mean, go someplace where there's surveillance cameras. Trust me, an axe murderer, he's not going to do it in front of a movie camera that's recording every moment. So lots of different things you can do. But the main thing is go in with your eyes open and have fun. Don't suck all the life out of it because you're so worried about it being a scary thing.
Always make sure that you're comfortable. If it feels wrong, don't do it.
Yep. Trust your spidey senses. You've been listening to Domination Submission Radio. I'm Mike Makai. My co-host is Little Red, Crazy, Switchy Amazon. And we hope you'll come back next week and listen to more Domination Submission Radio. Bye-bye now.